we were talking about, Bitcoin inevitably winning, and I kind of want to go back to, and I completely agree with you. I think you said it perfectly. It's not necessarily that the state's power comes from the monopoly on the issuance of money itself, but it comes from the monopoly on violence, right? And the but at the same time, right, the ability for the state to have this money printer also allows them, as in the case in the U.S. where Joe Biden basically hired 87,000 more tax collectors, or however which way you want to see it. Um, Clearly, and I'm referencing my mind, right. A lot of the theories written in the book, The Sovereign Individual. Um, I think if Bitcoin wins, I think it's a fundamental power threat to that ability, that privilege. And there's a huge bureaucracy. I heard it the other day. I think it was on Tucker, um, that the United States government is the number one employer in the world. Right? You have this bureaucracy that's funded by that money printer, and Bitcoin is a fundamental threat to that. What?
I hesitate. Sorry to interrupt you. I hesitate to call it a threat because really Bitcoin isn't a threat. Bitcoin is a boon. It's a boon to the federal government. It's a boon to everybody. The efficiency that's going to bring to the market and to the United States will be a net benefit to the United States. And if the United States accepts Bitcoin entrepreneurialism, it will allow those entrepreneurs and businesses to route money through the United States, bringing in a huge windfall of taxes. So even though it might seem on the surface to be adversarial to the United States, it's actually not if the correct attitude is taken from the beginning. And I think that's what needs to be put across. Not that Bitcoin's a dangerous, not that Bitcoin's a threat, that it's actually super useful, super beneficial to the American government if it takes its proper constitutional posture and acts as a public servant. And as for the the legions of people being released to extract the blood of the American people, uh, what Bitcoin will do once again is impose a discipline on everyone, government and non-government as well, so that everybody serves each other. The American government, in its original smaller form, was a servant of the people, and it can return to being that also. But what it cannot do is print money to create a distorted economy in a distorted country where there is excess money essentially from nowhere to spend on threatening people and other kinds of things which are non-economic, which actually nobody wants except for a small number of lobbyists. So this is the true advantage and the true opportunity that Bitcoin brings to the United States. It will restore order, economic order to the United States, restore a government that is the servant of the people, not the master of the people, and I think that's a very reasonable goal to go for. It's not going to hurt the United States. On the contrary, it's going to be a huge advantage to the United States because it's one of the few countries that has the wherewithal and the get up and go to do things like flying to the moon. So I think America, if it embraces Bitcoin, is going to see an economic boom, the likes of which has never been seen on Earth. And this is why they absolutely must do that, also to stop Americans from going to other jurisdictions to bring that Bitcoin magic to those jurisdictions. And as you know, El Salvador is now the number one country on earth for Bitcoin in terms of how they're approaching it and their plans for the future. And it's very easy to see a couple of steps into the future where all the entrepreneurs that are in Bitcoin, which is going to be the global money, are all situated in El Salvador, in San Salvador, the capital. So um, for Americans, this is not an ideal situation, but it absolutely is going to happen. And during my trip to El Salvador, I met people from Denmark, from Sweden, from the United States, all living recently moved to El Salvador because of what's happening there with Bitcoin. So that's a very, very big deal. And it's something people should be paying attention to because they're going to win. And of course, I don't have a problem with them winning. The good guys have to win. And if these guys are the good guys, then they're going to win. It's as simple as that. Should America? Am I rooting for America? Well, yes, I am rooting for America. But if they refuse to be the good guys, if they insist on doubling down on being the bad guys, well, then the money's going to go to the place where it needs to be.
Yeah, and and that's another thing that I kind of riff on. I want to riff on beauty on, because like unfortunately the way that I'm seeing it, and I'm in this weird, you can call it privilege, because I make money having to talk about Bitcoin, or at least cover what is happening about Bitcoin every single day, and because of that privileged position, I I'm seeing the slow motion pushback by the administrative state in the United States. And I fundamentally believe that this administrative state has captured the American people in a way, right? We have gone so far away from the original vision of small government in the United States. The Constitution, it was so well written that it still keeps them somewhat in check, but still, man, there it's like every single day they just take another chip at it. And what hurts me, and what doesn't make me so optimistic on a developed country like the US, is their recent moves, specifically by the US Treasury Office of Foreign Asset Control, to kind of set a precedent and censor open source software. Right? They did that, and I think that was sending a clear message. And the reason that I believe they did that is because Bitcoin is a threat to U.S. sanction policy, and because the U.S. is the global reserve currency, right? It's
You mean
able
the U.S.
to
dollar is
the US dollar, I apologize. The US
exactly?
dollar is the global reserve currency. It's able to weaponize the dollar, and that gives the bureaucratic state, the administrative state, tremendous amount of power in DC. So I have trouble seeing them willingly give up that type of power, and that's kind of where I'm hung up on.
Well, I think if you're going to be hung up on something, you need to hang the phone up for real, because you need to look at history uh, beyond the last 10 years. That's very important. During the era of the Soviet Union, it was assumed by everybody that this situation would never change. There would always be a USSR, it would always be an enemy of the United States. And then one day everybody woke up and the USSR was just gone. So this can happen in your lifetime. It can happen that the dollar ceases to be the global reserve currency of the world. And it's very easy to imagine this happening, because if BRICS and all of the Central America and South America and the states on the west coast of Africa all decide to settle on Bitcoin, then all of a sudden you have, at the very minimum, a multipolar currency world where the dollar isn't the center of it anymore. And we must also remember this is a matter of numbers. There's 330 million Americans and 7 billion people on Earth. If those 7 billion people, excluding all the Americans, are using Bitcoin, this is orders of magnitude bigger than the United States. And so all of the things you're citing are important to you because you're an American living where you live, and that's they're germane to you. They pertain to you. But other people who live in other countries don't know anything about OFAC or anything else. And those three-letter, four-letter agencies don't have jurisdiction outside of the United States. So not only does people not know who they are or what they do, but they don't care if they find out, because they don't have jurisdiction in countries like El Salvador and Nigeria and all these other places. So it's very important when we talk about a global network like the internet and like the Bitcoin network to look at it from the position of a global citizen. Well, not a global citizen, but somebody who's not from one particular country. America is only one country out of many countries. It's one jurisdiction. They're sealed inside their jurisdiction, and so are the agencies that work there. And they cannot stop El Salvador, for example, from making Bitcoin legal tender, or Saudi Arabia, or Nigeria or Brazil or any of these other countries. And if enough of these countries do that, and of course they're incentivized to do it, then the magic of Bitcoin will happen. So it's very important not to look at Bitcoin through the kitchen roll tube at just one thing. It's a global phenomenon, it's a global network. Literally anyone, anywhere can join it and use it. And if that's true, which of course it is, it means that no single country can dominate it and exert control over the users. So the United States has a sanction regime. Well, they're entitled to do that, it's a sovereign country. But nobody else on earth has to follow it. And I think this is very important to understand. America is a great country, but it's not the boss of the world. And once people stop using the dollar, then that's going to become even more true than it is now. So when we talk about Bitcoin, it's important to understand what jurisdiction means, to understand how many people are there, how many people are outside the United States, and what that actually means in terms of Bitcoin adoption and the result of Bitcoin adoption.